Hey guys, it's Matt. My big dilemma this morning was whether to do a midnight reality or an old-fashioned radio show. I mean, the old-fashioned radio show gets kind of stupid at times. It has absurd and ridiculous sponsors like Michelle O's Tuck Guard, Michael O's Tuck Guard underwear. But the midnight reality should really be a more serious conversation about our state of affairs here temporarily in this reality system. Well, I went to CNN.com just to make sure I'm not missing anything, and I like to give you guys the most current up-to-date news because half of you have thrown out your televisions. And this made it clear it's going to have to be the old-fashioned radio show. CNN.com headline: hours away from U.S. government shutting down. I repeat, hours away from U.S. government shutting down. And they have a gigantic countdown clock. Let me scroll down here. There's a countdown clock right under the multifaceted story. 0 days. Oh my God. 17 hours, 1 minute, 6, 5, 4, 3, 17 hours, 1 minute, and switch. Oh my God. 17 hours, 0 minutes. Holy shit, guys, we better make emergency plans. I'm throwing out what I was going to talk about. We need to make plans now for this catastrophic event. But Matt, they've done this to us 25 times in the last 25 years. And they've shut the government down a few times. And they've had these emergency sessions of Congress to secure funding and debt ceiling negotiate. They've done this. They're playing the same boy that cried wolf card again? They're playing it again. How come people buy this? I have no idea. What happens if they really shut it down? Nothing. Ninth level of Metroid. Absolutely nothing. Well, it'll come out the other side with no repercussions or ramifications. The funding will just magically appear and everything will go back to the way it was. But while it's shut down, of course, they'll try to make as many different types of people's lives miserable, as many as they can. They're already alluding to it right here. Let me look at the article. The shutdown is expected to have consequential impacts across the country, from air travel to clean drinking water. And if anybody thought I was in any way joking, I was reading from the headline right here. If you don't fund this government, there will be a major impact on clean drinking water in the United States. If you don't want to fund this government with billions of dollars a day, it will just waste. You're putting babies and infants at risk. You horrible people that refuse to fund this government, the people in Congress that won't sit down and negotiate. You're putting children at risk. The drinking water just in a few days in the United States will return to the third world levels. Basically, you could go out to lower parts of the Sudan and drink from wells like the same Omar Sharif tried to protect his well in Lawrence of Arabia. That will be 100 times cleaner and safer than the drinking water in every big city in the United States if you don't fund this government, you poor devils. Subheadline: 9 ways a government shutdown could affect your daily life. Subheadline: House Republicans vent frustration after failed vote on spending. Guys, we'll end this story, move on to other things because it plays out the same way every single time. I mean, they have unlimited access to whatever money they need. They can, quote, print up on a supercomputer $1 trillion a day or $1 trillion a second. There is no limit. There's never a shortage of money anywhere in government, yet they keep passing this story off. Now, I'll admit, it was well hidden. This fact was well hidden, even from people like us 12 to 15 years ago. The whole fraud of factional, that's a Freudian slip. Fractional reserve banking is factional. That whole fraud was what was there. If you really investigated it, bankers knew about it, but it was generally hidden from the masses, even from our sorts of investigators. But this has now been out there. I mean, how are they still even, it's not just conspiracy people that know these sorts of things, that the Treasury working with the Fed, and they just print up whatever they want. And please, I hope nobody's trying to give me a lecture about the Fed being a collection of private banks. And they're all at the same table together. Does it really matter where the dividing line is? They print up $1 trillion a second. But somehow they're able to pass the same story off every single time to the masses. And thousands of people a minute are seeing this headline, not just at CNN.com, but WashingtonPost.com, NewYorkTimes.com, all over the fake internet that comes from the same room at the Ministry of Information. Thousands of people are trying to reenact the opening scenes from The Wizard of Oz. There ain't no tornado, but they're going to use the same bunker to ride out the government shutdown. Somebody right now in the middle of Kansas is going, oh my God, look at 17-hour countdown clock. Get to the bunker. Get to the bunker. What's that from? Get the book. Get the book. Get to the opening scenes of Armageddon. Get to the bunker. Is there a tornado? No, but we will ride out this government shutdown in the tornado bunker. But Dorothy and Toto are still out there. Fuck them. Close the hatch. Fuck them. Who cares about Dorothy and Toto? Close the hatch. We're going to ride this out in safety. Headline: What we know about the man charged with Tupac Shakur's 1996 shooting death. And there's a picture of him here, charged. What he's still being held in custody since 1996? What the hell? I got to click on this. I'll be back in a second. What the hell? Last living suspect in 1996 drive-by shooting of Tupac Shakur, indicted in Las Vegas. They just picked this guy up. Talk about a freaking cold case. Who'd they pick up here? Dwayne, quote, Keffe D, K-E-F-F-E-D Davis. Dwayne Keffe D Davis. My God, you'd think it's been since 1996. The guy just started to relax. He's able to go out and walk down the street and get his muffin and his coffee. And then they talk about a damn cold case. But this is somehow related right to what happened to my main man, Biggie Smalls, who brought Puff Daddy into the industry, whatever. They're both my main men. So wasn't Biggie, who died first? Biggie got shot first and then it was a retaliation on Tupac. Well, I can't keep it straight. They're both on David Bowie Island anyway, probably performing together tonight on David Bowie Island. They got Chester, Benningfield which is, what is that? It's Podesta's kid, I guess. He's going to do this Linkin Park stuff. Dave, if you could get on David Bowie Island tonight, the quality of entertainment, Michael Jackson still does gigs. The quality of entertainment. They just actually said they just found a lost continent. Let me look that story up. That's a truth drop. Of course it is. Here's an article on it, and who's it from? It's from our friends in the United Kingdom. This is from the BBC. It's like that scene in Gangs of New York. We'd like to the Steppen Ken. I looked that up once. It's Steppen Ken, I think it is. That dance where Leonardo DiCaprio da Vinci dances with, what's her name, Cameron Diaz for the first time. He's like, we'd like to welcome our Roman Catholic friends. I should announce that as well every time I do a video. I'd like to announce a warm welcome to our one Roman Catholic friend who participates at this Truth channel, and she knows who she is, and she's actually helped us in the past. But anyway, this says from the BBC, 2021? I thought this lost continent thing was a news story. Matt, you out of it. Anyway, it took scientists 375 years to discover the eighth continent of the world, which had been hiding in plain sight all along. But mysteries about the landmass still remain. Okay, this makes no sense. It took scientists 375 years to discover the eighth continent. So they started looking for the eighth continent 375 years ago. But let's just say they started looking. It says right here, the bot wrote this, it took 375 years. So I guess I'll give them a pass for the first few decades when they started looking for the eighth continent. What did they have back in the 1600s? Did they have the hot air balloons? I don't know. I don't think so. I'll give them a pass until, say, the invention of the 747. But in 1970, when you had 747 airplanes going all over the place, and by 1995, when you said you had 40,000 satellites, and even now North Korea has got some big boys up there, you can't find the eighth. Guys, it's not the eighth island of Gilligan's Island chain. It's the eighth continent. They're calling it a continent, undiscovered until recently. It's not some little atoll off the end of Gilligan's Island that Ginger and Marianne swam out to naked to be alone. It's a sorry, people get really upset at me. It's a continent. What about your Google Earth? What's your Google Earth been doing? And couldn't you retask the North Korean satellites or something to look for the eighth continent? Talk about hidden in plain sight, just like it says in this article. What a joke. Oh, I see here. I paused and read down a bit. It's mostly underwater. Oh, of course it is. Is it Atlantis? But they say 94% of it is underwater. There's a portion that's above the water. And Matt, guess what that portion is? David Bowie Island. There it is. So, well, yeah, a portion of it's showing, but they still couldn't find the eighth continent. It's a continent. They're saying it's something like Australia. I mean, that's not a small little thing off the end of Tasmania. Zealandia, they're calling it. Zealand. Zealandia or Zealandia, the supposed missing eighth continent that was discovered after 375 years. And I'm off the BBC now. What is this? The Times of India. Every source I've looked at, they stress that they've been looking for it for 375 years. I mean, that is very important to the occult nature of this bullshit article. I mean, that's just an impossible stuffed Lenin as well. Like, well, how would they possibly know exactly when anybody started looking for it? Why does every story carry forth that it's been in search of for 375 years? Well, obviously, that number and that lineage going back 375 years means something unique to the creeps that they're carrying through this story that I don't care to try to figure out. I mean, okay, if relatively recently they discovered an eighth continent, how could there possibly be any supporting material showing exactly when this eighth continent was trying to be discovered and by whom, going back to basically the 17th century? I mean, that's an absolute joke. Also, something very strange here, guys. The original article I found from BBC was February 8th, 2021. Yet I knew this seemed to be a recent story. It kept popping up for me recently. So the same headline 2 days ago, 4 days ago, 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, all stressing the 375 days, all stressing that a new eighth continent has been found. So they came out with this, or the BBC presented this, and others probably in 2021. But there are all these news sources over the past few weeks presenting it like a new headline. A bot or Chat GPT, if you're listening to me in real time, did you just get confused or something? Or maybe there's something wrong with the bot's programming, some sort of, I don't know what you would call that sort of programming anomaly, a time dilation, presenting something from 2.5 years ago as brand new. And what if it really gets confused? We're going to go to CNN.com, it'll say President Kennedy assassinated. I mean, will they try to pull something like that off? Or man lands on the moon? They'll recycled 1963 and 1969 headlines as if they're brand new. And here's the thing, Matt, how many people will believe it? So wrapping up this segment about the missing eighth continent now found, yes, of course, in some way, I believe it's related to that. We can make a song out of it. To that place they can go where the pineapples grow, that they don't let the proletariat in. We could make a song out of it. Yeah, it's related in some way, in my opinion. I looked at more sources. All the different links stress that 375 years. I don't know why that's so important to the creeps, but who cares? And what they're announcing here in terms of the discovery of an eighth continent, I don't think they're probably just giving away that this is David Bowie Island and the place that they go. The place that they go, I think you would agree, and I could speak for you, will never appear on no map. What is that? It's a rap song from Chuck D or something. My heroes don't appear on no stamp. The places that Bill Clinton goes don't appear on no map. And Michael Jackson is probably playing tonight with Tupac. I don't think that place where they can go, for anybody new here, I call it David Bowie Island because David Bowie's not dead. I mean, that is the biggest joke of all time. Go back and research the Black Star and the Lazarus Rising from the Dead album he put out before his supposed death. Not one picture of him struggling with cancer. Just a day or two after the Lazarus comes out, the Rising from the Dead. Come on, man. And then, no, it wasn't David Bowie himself as the reporter. He was as a mockery. No, that was to suck the truth community in. Maybe we'll learn our lesson. Yeah, it was a mockery of the whole David Bowie thing and him not being dead. But no, David Bowie himself didn't dress up as a guy at Rolling Stone magazine or wherever he was covering David Bowie. No, it was that, of course, to suck the truthers in, to get the truthers to embarrass themselves at the Thanksgiving table. It's all part of the same story. It's all part of the same, quote, conspiracy. But no, it wasn't David Bowie, okay? They made it look that way. They probably did the same thing to us with the Kavanaugh hearings. I mean, but the fact that they would even do that is maybe just as strange as having really done it. I don't know. And for anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, the guy is a Supreme Court Justice, Brett Kavanaugh, is it? He had an accuser. I don't know what I can say here. There were hearings where in the morning, the accuser gave her testimony. Kavanaugh then gave his in the afternoon. They were never seen together in the same room. Guys, look, okay, all I'm going to say is, I'm just going to keep it vague. That accuser, there was something very, very strange about her, okay? But this adversary that we're up against isn't stupid. It knows how to suck the truth community in, so it says stupid things in front of its friends and family at the Thanksgiving table. Oh, it's a worthy adversary, okay? We go running around the Thanksgiving table that the accuser was him. I mean, even if that's correct, which, do you see how they can play us, guys? I mean, yes, there was something bizarro with that accuser, but to say at the Thanksgiving table it was the damn Chief Justice, and what you just saw on CNN was like, I don't know, a scene from Wong Fu playing out. What was that? Wesley Snipes and Patrick Swayze. You're telling your family at the Thanksgiving table that the Kavanaugh hearings was a scene from Wong Fu, that dumbass movie. See how that kind of hurts the reputation of those in our community? Whether it was him or not, it was meant to be noticed. It was then meant for us to talk about it, which then kills our reputation even further. It's the mistakes on purpose principle. Headline: Slovakia to elect 5th prime minister in 4 years. So what? Who cares? It's all the same one world system. They don't even get a chair at the main table. They're sitting in the back where the dip and salsa is and shit, the chips and the drinks. They're back at those sets of chairs. They don't even get a prime chair at the creepy table. Slovakia. What's the difference between Slovakia and Slovenia? People in the U.S. are still trying to figure that out. Guys, closing some tabs here, quickly going back to the Tupac Shakur thing we talked about a few minutes ago. Of course, it's all the Notnilc and its bots and its fake reality. Everything has to be tied together. It said whatever the arrest happened in Las Vegas related to the Tupac Shakur killing stemmed from an investigation or an ongoing investigation. It said something like this, into the Biggie Smalls. Come on, man. They're tying it. See, reality gives itself away. You think there's any chance this could just be isolated without somehow, as reality has always done, tied the two together? And it's also an aspect of stalled century, reminding you that, the Tupac Shakur case is still going on. We're still living in that old world. It's absolutely more elements of stalled century, bringing up these old news items, reminding you that we still have links and the old world is still tied to the new. No doubt about it. Headline: Special counsel notes Trump's recent gun store visit in South Carolina. And it says here, federal prosecutors have told a federal judge, you're using the word federal too close together. If Donald Trump had bought a gun earlier this week during a campaign stop, he would be violating his release conditions as a criminal defendant and breaking the law, according to a Friday court filing. The first problem with this, federal prosecutors have told a federal judge. So the federal judge that's supposed to be at the height of understanding the laws, he didn't know or she didn't know, just sitting there in a chair blowing bubbles, dipping, blowing bubbles, dipping, blowing bubbles. The federal prosecutors, it says, have told. The federal judge were like, I'm so glad you told me. I didn't know that. I didn't know a defendant in a criminal trial, whatever, couldn't buy a gun. Reading further, it turns out Trump just went into the gun store, so it could be leaked that he bought a gun, so this controversial back and forth would start, but then his supporters would be so thrilled that he went into a gun store. It seems like the Notnilc narrative regarding Trump is just to float in general, like a general noise or a buzz to the American people, that he's done so many criminal things, January 6th, and so many things wrong, that it will make sense to everybody when they finally do put put him in jail or convict him of something. And we've talked about this a few months ago, guys. It is not outside the realm of possibility that he will be convicted or of several counts of whatever, whether it be buying a gun when or the January 6th stuff, and win the election at the same time. And then will he actually, for a short period of time, quote, end quote, run the country from behind bars? Now, isn't that a repeating theme in mob bosses, right? The Notnilc loves these sorts of repeating themes that carry these narratives below the surface. We hear all these stories in books and movies about mafia bosses, mob bosses being able to run everything while doing their time, not being powerless for the 5 to 7 years that they're in prison, actually continuing to run the operation. There's a whole scene in Goodfellas, 2 minutes of Paulie's with the Ray Liotta character and others. They're doing their time, but they have a whole separate section of the jail, and they get lobster brought in, and nothing's changed. They're still running the operation. Well, if they do that or get close to doing that, even with the way it's presenting, maybe he won't actually have the resolute desk from the Oval Office behind Andy Dufresne's bars, but anything like that, it's dropping the hint that this is the ultimate mob boss, who works for higher powers, of course. The ultimate mob boss is the president, Trump, or any president Notnilc is announcing. And even if there are criminal charges, and even if they go to jail for a short period of time, just like the mob bosses, they will continue to run things. Oh, it's as crazy, but the Notnilc is absolutely capable of this sort of insanity. It's capable of anything in this day and age, things we couldn't even imagine in the last century. Here's the headline I was looking for. Apparently, the writer's strike has ended. Oh, wow, Matt, we can get these wonderful movies and TV shows that Hollywood has been producing for the last 15 years back. Well, no and no. First of all, they can't produce anything anyway, but they can't, even if they could, they can't, if that makes any sense, because the actors are still on strike. What good is it? First of all, the writers are completely useless. We know they are, but what good is it that the writers, well, the Jimmy Fallon show can go on, the Jimmy Kimmel show, and those retread losers. The actors are still on strike, so they can't produce anything anyway. Not that it would be any good in the first place. Okay, here's the main part that interests us. The MOA, that's the memorandum. That's the memorandum of agreement. They keep saying MOA like it's very serious. The MOA also lays out terms for use of artificial intelligence with an agreement that doesn't prevent writers or productions from making use of generative AI, but prohibits using software to reduce or eliminate writers and their pay. Quote, a writer can choose to use AI when performing writing services if the company consents and provided that the writer follows applicable company policies. Oh, give me a break. But the company can't require the writer to use AI software or ChatGPT when performing writing services, the MOA states. The company can't require the writer to use. There would be no need for a writer. Okay, I just landed a big gig for Disney as a writer, $140,000 a year, and the job is just to plug in ideas in the Chat GPT, because you see, I'm required by the company to use the Chat GPT. If you're required, then what's the point of the person sitting in the chair? It says they can't require what? So they could say, writer, per the MOA, we would really like you to not use your own original thoughts. Just plug the damn concepts into the Chat GPT. Sit there, print it out, and hand it in to us, and we'll pay you $140,000. But they can say, we want you to use the Chat GPT, but then the person say, per my MOA, you can't require this of me. If I put my own bullshit concepts down on paper, you're going to have to at least consider them. That's true. We can't require you to use the AI, but we'll still pay you just to sit in a chair. Look, these writers, whoever's negotiating on their behalf, probably works for the studios, but they're probably not in on it. They're probably trying to negotiate the best they can, and they're in some way worried about, of course, the AI taking over their jobs. And look, of course, they weren't given any concessions that the Notnilc didn't expect to give them the day the strike started. I mean, the Notnilc probably wanted the strike. It, as usual, I'm sure every bit of it is playing out exactly like the studios want, which is just a tentacle extension of Notnilc. if they have to literally have writers because of this agreement sitting in chairs, just literally printing out what the chat GPT comes up with and then tweaking it here and there. Maybe the writers will become proofers. They'll become proofers and spell checkers for the chat GPT. Then again, money to the Notnilc is never a problem. Maybe the writers will become like city hall workers and just sit there doing nothing. So be it. It will still all play out, of course, exactly like the Notnilc not just wanted, but predicted and expected it to come out. And by the way, the first announcement of what new project will be in the works, the first thing that came out after it hit the news that the writer's strike has ended, a reboot of The Office, that more stalled century. And The Office, that was originally a UK office comedy. It was rebooted in the United States. Most people in the United States don't even realize it came from the UK, the exact same scenarios and idea. It was just some British office, and they adapted it a bit, changed a little bit around, but it followed the general theme and feel of the British comedy, brought that to the United States. What is it, 7, 8, 9 seasons here, whatever it is. Yeah, everybody's seen it. It's a cute little comedy. It changed comedy in the United States a bit. It did some groundbreaking things, and it has its place in television history. Per stalled century, they're going to reboot it. But the point is, this is the first big idea that comes out after it's announced that the writer's strike has ended. So all these writers sitting around doing nothing, this is the best they could come up with. They have all the ramen noodle bowls piled up in the sink, and they're ready to get evicted, right? Because they're not getting paid and this and that. But they have a lot of time on their hands to what? Write and come up with brilliant new ideas that as soon as the strike is over, they can present to the studio heads and to Hollywood and say, you want this strike to end because we writers have all these ideas that we've come up with. And as soon as you end the strike, the sooner I can turn these ideas over to you. And then what they come up with, a reboot of The Office. With genius ideas like that, the studios would be like, well, you guys had a lot of time off. You got anything else for us? And like, oh, yeah, we do. We got a lot of mo. We got Club of Land. We got a lot of mo. We got a reboot of, what is it called? The Andy Griffith Show about the sheriff in Maybury with Don Knotts or whatever. We got a reboot, but it's not Maybury. It's a town called Dingleberry, starring Steven Seagal in a wheelchair. Steven Seagal, I think, is like law enforcement, or he was, or some sort of like a deputized sheriff. It was on television for a while. You take him, but he's in a wheelchair because he can't move anymore. And it's a town called Dingleberry. That's what you got for us? Well, if not, just put all your efforts into The Office. So writer's strike has ended, and eventually the actors will come back, all per the Notnilc's plans, and it'll just return to what it was. Reboots of Magnum P.I., horrible reboots of things like MacGyver, same old stalled century ideas. And, there are people that you talk to, your friend Tony or whatever, they won't see anything wrong with it, but their subconscious, if they're real people, will wrestle with it. The subconscious of people is probably going insane through some incredible steroided up version of cognitive dissonance. That could be the real problem here. In real people, at least, the frontal lobes, the thinking part of the brain, is securely on the ship of fools. But if they are real people and not NPCs, I think there's a whole part of them that is literally probably going insane. The part that's being cut off from higher self, or the subconscious, unconscious mind is so much more powerful than the part of Matt speaking to you in the spellcraft language of English. I mean, maybe that's one of the key tactics of the ship of fools, to take the conscious mind in a certain place. Frommer's tried to warn you. To my friend Tony, everything out his window is completely normal, but then the subconscious, the lower layers below the iceberg, starts to go insane. Hey, Tony. Writer's strike, longest in Hollywood history, and the first and best thing they could come up with after they came back is a reboot of The Office. Tony's like, yeah? What's the problem with that? I like The Office. Hey, Tony, well, what did you do when you first saw The Force Awakens in 2015? And Rey, this desert rat Rey, she gets into a junked Millennium Falcon and within 30 seconds flies loop-de-loops through shit better than Chewie or Han ever did, completely destroying the image of your heroes, Han and Chewie. And this Rey had no training. She just jumped behind the damn yoke or whatever the Millennium Falcon had. What did you think of that, Tony? This is not a joke. He says, I thought The Force Awakens wasn't as good as it could have been, Matt, but it was pretty decent. It was okay. I went, Oh my God. To close out this headline before we move on, it says here the writer's contract is likely to influence the terms of SAG-AFTRA's ongoing negotiations, as well as contracts in other sectors and industries. SAG-AFTRA. That's the Actors Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, SAG. Hey, Fran Dresser, when acronyms don't work, like SAG, you don't have to use them. That's right, the nanny, Fran Dresser, apparently is the head of the Screen Actors Guild, responsible for the negotiations on their behalf. And, of course, it's all a Notnilc script. The whole reality is a Notnilc script, at least the screen part that tries to put its slimy appendage down into your heart-centered reality bubble. It's all a script, but the nanny will think she'll pat herself on the back. And as soon as the strike is over, then she'll return to her Brooklyn neighborhood in New York that's underwater now. And then probably, as those girls did, flock to Long Beach Island to harass people from outside Philadelphia with Brooklyn and New York and Bronx accents. And, you know where you guys know anywhere good place for happy hour? That Fran Dresser and her whole family will invade LBI the way the New Yorkers invaded it. New Yorkers invaded it when people and my friends from outside Philly tried to go. We said, oh my God, this whole place is New York. You know first, I told you, I love my favorite story of all time, first minute on Long Beach Island. These girls in a Jeep, all very attractive, a little too much makeup, like those wives in Goodfellas. You guys know any good places for happy hour? I went, oh God, Tony, it's all New York here. Let's just give our deposit up and go back home. Speaking of New York, regions stunned and swamped by record-breaking rainfall as more downpours are expected. More Notnilc weather, Matt? Yeah. I mean, I can't explain it. We don't know exactly what's happening, but yeah, more Notnilc weather. Tropical storm Ophelia first kind of touched the Philadelphia area, say, Friday night of last weekend. And I think what happened in New York, it's remnants of the same system. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. And we didn't get a tremendous amount of rain, but it came in Friday night and it rained all day Saturday. Well, there were some breaks, no doubt, but it rained all day Sunday, all day Monday, and all day Tuesday. Now, many hours on Monday and Tuesday, it was still raining, but it was a fine mist rain. It was very, very fine mist, but it literally didn't let up for 4 days. Didn't see the sun on Wednesday. Little rain and mist came back Thursday, Friday. The sun is popping through now Saturday morning for almost the first time in a week. And I think it's still part of the same system that New York just got hammered with. Matt, don't you think it's completely natural and legitimate? No, of course I don't. When you talk about something for 25 years with a really skilled and attractive frontman like Al the Boar, and you talk about monkeys, you talk about primate change and global charming, the charming of Al the Boar, and you push that in millions of different places for 25 years. At some point, you will be expected to deliver. Something creepy will expect something creepier to deliver. They didn't just get all dressed up for nothing. They didn't push this in millions of different places. If you add up the links, for nothing. They will push it, and at some point, they will get it bad enough where they will convince people that are on the fence, 100 million people that aren't so sure, a few more of these major events, and they've been working hard at it, and their techniques to do blank, pause, blank to weather are improved over the last 10 years. When a gigantic hurricane just stalled and sat over Houston, and then the year later, it just stalled and sat right on the beach, basically the border of South and North Carolina, and all this weird shit, the 100 million people on the fence will basically jump to the Notnilc side of the fence and say, you people that questioned it, now you are gust denialists. Remember the great word that came from Finland. You people now are confirmed are gust denialists. But I'd go back at them and say, well, I'm not a gust denialist. I was standing out there in the room with Gouda, because Gouda's back at my house longer than that damn cat's at Pam's house. I can't tell you how many times I said to Gouda, Gouda, as we look at this tropical storm outside the house, they can't call us gust denialists, because I am acknowledging the gust. We're not gust denialists. The gusts are actually here. We're saying some asshole jerk minion creep in a Chernobyl control center caused the gust. Not a gust denialist. We're saying the gust didn't come from nature. It came from creeps. I'm not a gust denialist. I'm a gust suspicious. Just like when somebody tapes a banana to the wall, they say it's sold for $40,000. I don't buy that either. Guys, just to close out this topic, weather, on a more serious subject, and I have to be very, quote, calculated in how I say this, like hobo code type stuff. I mean, I don't know why I feel I have to be so calculated. I just feel I do. I watch the weather, 3 times, 4 times a week, and I usually watch it very closely, not always like for giveaways or something I can use as to determine what is going on with this weather, but every so often a weather person, not that they're in on it, they will give something away that I don't think they're probably, or the Notnilc would really want them to say. Not that they are in on it and know all about tales of chemicals. The weather people at that level know nothing, but they still can give things away. Let me give you an example. It was when Ophelia, I was watching, the models had predicted this tropical low would develop around Florida, or I don't know if it was in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic side of Florida, but it didn't even exist, and the models were predicting its creation, a very strong tropical depression. Fine, well, they've been doing that that doesn't mean Notnilc, they've been doing that for 20, 30 or more years. Well, the thing then formed, then the models, I watched Cecily Tynan on Action News, or the new guy on CBS 10, and most of the models had it coming right up the coast. Few models, the European model had it going, the European computer model for weather forecasting had it going off to the east, where, not quite, but Bermuda might be more affected, and the East Coast wouldn't be affected at all. One of the weather people said something that was almost like gave something away, that I just got the sense that Notnilc doesn't want this talked about. He said, well, these models have Ophelia, some going a little inland, but some going, again, out to sea, off the Jersey Shore, out to the east. But he said, but there's this, I don't know, he didn't say line of storms, but it was like a line of storms, or I don't know the terminology, a high pressure or a gradient, whatever it is. And he said that when this happens, the tropical storm will be drawn towards it. And he said that this thing is coming off Ohio or Michigan, and I'm sorry, what the terminology was, another system, a line of storms, a gradient between high and low, I don't know, but the key was that this, he said will probably be drawn. It's drawn like a magnet towards that other system, and I went, basically, I'm thinking, is this how, per what we see in the sky? Tales of chemical, is this how they direct it? Like directing iron filings with little magnets, 5, 8, 10 inches away, and you pull the iron filing just a little bit here, then you reposition your magnet. Is this how systems are moved? And I had, again, I watched the weather closely. I'd never heard saying that this other system, or the line that it's forming, actually in some way acts as a magnet to pull, and he was right. Whatever he was talking about that existed in Michigan or Ohio, or again, I don't know exactly where it was, it pulled Ophelia way more inland. So the low itself traveled over Virginia, and it only went out to sea kind of when it hit Philadelphia. But then it stalled. It's just stalled for days, and this bits and pieces of it, probably what's happening to New York right now. So you would understand that this Earth, whatever this thing is here, is a big, big thing. And these creeps, they're not gods. But, in terms of have they figured out to put these lines in place that act as a magnet? And, again, their sophistication in this regard seems to be much more than it was 10 or 15 years ago with things like this, and, the smell of smoke outside New York and Philadelphia, the end of the first week in June, where it smelled like literally a forest fire a mile down the road, they're saying was coming from Canada. I was stuffing wet towels, not real wet, but that sort of thing, blocking up the doors and windows like that movie The Mist was. It was that strong, that thick, and that unhealthy. And what happened the first week in June or so with the smoke pouring down to Philadelphia and New York, and I know other parts of the country, the U.S., got smoked out from Canada to a different degree, and this went on for weeks or even more than a month. I talked about it at the time, so it just didn't feel natural at all. It felt completely like the hand of Notnilc. Of course it did. And the weather people gave something away then. If you listen closely, the weather person said, normally this smoke would just go up to the upper atmosphere, but this is keeping it low. And even the weather person was a little confused, and they kind of gave something away. That, like, what are the chances that this also is occurring at the same time, that to keep the smoke on the ground or under a 2,000-foot ceiling, when normally smoke would rise up into the upper atmosphere? So these things we see in the sky that I have to talk about as the inverse, tales of chemicals, and we still don't get a good handle as to how this is all being pulled off. But again, what it does, Notnilc, is always multi-layered. See, if it can get us thinking that it's only about weather manipulation, if it's only about the weather, then that does cover up the other two or three things that those things in the sky are actually doing as well. And it's not one or the other. It's an expert at leaking information for its own aims. So if it can get certain groups to believe that these things in the sky, these 100-mile-long trails are real, and maybe the truth community was onto something, well, then it's just about weather. And these patterns have existed to affect the weather since the 40s. And if it's just about the weather, then the other two or three reasons for these things in the sky may be more hidden. Maybe they will want the story about weather manipulation to come to the forefront to, again, cover up what it really is. I mean, and it's not, that doesn't mean it's not used to affect the weather either. I'm sure it is. But of course, again, what it does, there's always three aims or more. And it's an expert at leaking out, the right information at the right time to generate the wrong narratives. Also, when I watch the weather, especially regarding the path or track of a hurricane or a tropical storm, I'm skeptical of all these different squiggly lines and the potential paths per predictive models. To me, I always look at it and say, they probably know exactly what line is the correct line. But the other little squiggly lines that present the potential paths, so the hurricane, it'll show 5 lines going up over Virginia and 1 line going out to Bermuda and 1 line going inland. And so they have that many different predictive models. See, I don't buy it. The squiggly lines could just be telling people as they watch the weather that, you see, it's very hard to predict, and it's not an exact science. And look at these are sophisticated computer models, and here's the low forming here, and here's the potential track and path. 1 line up here, 5 lines going over here. Like, that tells the person watching that, without anything being said, that they really don't know, and they're pretty good predictors, but this is all, maybe it's completely predictable. And the lines are just lines. There is no modeling behind the line, potentially. There is no computer simulation. For each squiggly line, that's its own separate simulation coming from a different computer model. Where they always only mention 2 models. They always talk about the US one, whatever the National Weather Service forecasts, and then they have the European predictive computer model. Soon there'll be the ChatGPT weather predictive computer model. Well, if they only talk about 2, what are the other 5 or 6 or 7 or sometimes 10 different lines for? Where are those models? Wouldn't one model, looking at these different models over a 10-year period, be proven to be the most accurate, and all those other squiggly lines would go away? Yeah, you hear what I'm saying. The squiggly lines themselves could be part of the general ruse of weather prediction, meaning one of those lines is the real line, and they know exactly where it's going to go. Maybe. Thanks for listening.